Hello, ladies, and welcome to another edition of Menopause Made Easy with Tanya. I hope you can hear me. I'm sitting outside and I'm not very comfortable, but I wanted to be outside and listen to the rain falling, and I just find it so soothing. Anyway, I wanted to share something vulnerable with you today in this podcast episode. We are in the month of the heart. And what's more important than being vulnerable and allowing our heart to shine and give a gift of maybe this resonates with you today to look deeper into your soul, into your heart, and do some healing. So, as many of you know, I wrote Cookie Dough in the Dark, and I won't be writing a follow-up, but this is why I started this podcast many years ago. And I have been unfolding my journey through various episodes. And, when it comes to cravings and just, oh my gosh, all the things that I have learned. And years and years ago, I read Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Oh my goodness, Elizabeth Gilbert. And I loved it. I mean, I think I can't even remember. It was a long time ago. And then I read her book, Big Magic. And then more recently, I read The Signature of All Things, which I just loved. And I've told everybody about that book. And I thought, well, you know what? I really like her as an author. So I'm going to ask for Christmas her book, All the Way to the River. I had no idea what it was about. I didn't even know it was a memoir. I didn't know anything. I just thought, you know what? I love to read. I liked her style. And there you go. So I just, started reading it, and wow. Okay. It made me feel so uncomfortable. Like I said, I had no idea what it was about. I had no idea it was centered around addiction. I picked it picked at something really deep inside. Again, I felt uncomfortable. And this is an interesting journey of healing and peeling the layers of the onion. So I've talked openly about my addiction to sugar, and my husband always says, Tanya, don't say you're addicted to sugar. And I'm like, I was addicted to sugar. A normal person does not go to a bakery and get 6 to 12 of, donuts or cupcakes or, ooey gooey apple crisp bars, date squares, brownies, and then eats them all by the time they get home. Like that is a problem. Okay. And I would ebb and flow through this addiction on and off from the time I was a teenager into my mid to late 30s. Oh my gosh, it was just so long and so horrendous. And that's addiction. It's not always enjoyment. Like I said, this went on for years. And at the time, I did not have the emotional vocabulary. I didn't have the tools in my toolbox. I didn't even have the words for the unraveling of my parents' marriage. And then my mother left and went back to England where she was born. And all this is happening at a very awkward teenage time in my life. And, a lot of, um, um, what do you call it? This was unusual. Like all of my friends, their parents are still together. So it was a very dark, gloomy, lonely, chaotic time in my life. And I felt unworthy. I felt unlovable. I felt displaced. And I turned to sugar. I turned to food as my comfort. And I'm not blaming either of my parents. This was my journey that I was supposed to go through, but I didn't know how to process what I was feeling. So for years and decades, I ate it. So I hope you can hear me through all these raindrops dropping down because I don't want to re-record this. So anyway, as I mentioned, I turned to food, and it wasn't carrots and broccoli or steak and avocado. I turned to sugar, which lights up my brain like a pinball machine. And so for some of you, this may affect you more than others, but I definitely have a brain where I light up, and it's my dopamine. And, for many of you that have had any kind of addiction. One cookie was enough, and then you need two cookies to get the same feeling, and then you need six cookies, and then you need 12, and then you have to eat the whole box, and then you start, making the cookies and adding banana bread and Chelsea buns and God knows what else I would consume. Okay. So in the moment, I suppose it felt comforting, but honestly, it never really made me feel better. It led to binging. It led to throwing up in my teenage years. It led to a lot of shame, a lot of darkness. I've done episodes on shame. And I share parts of this story in Cookie Dough in the Dark. And when I wrote that book in my 40s, I thought I was being vulnerable. And I was, but I was still guarded because, like I've mentioned many a times, you peel back the layer of the onion. There's some things you're not fully ready to embrace. There's, you don't have the language for it. You don't have the tools for it. You don't have the emotional support for it. You don't have the inner strength for it. And so I revealed a lot, and I have received a lot of amazing feedback from that book, and anybody who reads it and they say, oh my gosh, I see myself. Thank you for sharing. Because a lot of times we think that there's something the matter with us. What's the matter with me? And now when I'm reading this new book, it's making me squirm, and it's bringing up layers I didn't even know that were really still there. And that's what I want to talk about. Okay. So, I have a couple of notes here. In this book, like I said, I had no idea what it was about. And it's about Elizabeth and her girlfriend, Raya. And Raya was addicted to drugs, and Elizabeth is addicted to sex and love. And addiction is addiction is addiction, right? So my food of choice, my drug of choice was sweet things. And as I'm reading this book, my first reaction was honestly judgment. I found myself thinking, I don't like these people. Oh my gosh, I had some really, it was tough reading this. And then I started seeing parts of myself in them, which made me sad. And also, I appreciated her openness as well. And as I said, my drug of choice was sugar, and I used it, I abused it in all the wrong ways. And as much as I hate admitting this, I saw a lot of myself in Elizabeth, that deep need for attention in other attention in order to feel worthy. I needed to feel needed. So I think this came from my parents separating, and I just felt unlovable and discarded. And again, that wasn't their intention at all. So I'm not blaming them, but it's how I felt. And so I can definitely see patterns in my life where I used food as a drug, but also I craved people's attention. I craved people's love. And I'm going to have to do some deeper soul searching into that, because I definitely need to explore that. And that hurts. Ouch. Ouch. That really hurts. But when I look back, I know it's true. And on page 93 of her book, she writes, the unfortunate reality of addiction, though, is that all active addicts keep secrets and tell lies. They really have no choice. An addict must lie in order to protect her supply. That's how the addict's reality becomes split between what she is doing in the shadows and what she is allowing other people to see. And I can absolutely see the times I lied to myself, I lied to my husband, I lied to my kids about how much I was eating and what I was doing and how I was feeling, only again to protect myself. And when I read this paragraph, I was like, okay, I have to do a podcast on this. And I stopped because like I said, I know that split reality. There were so many times I lied. I would make excuses to leave the house because I needed to go and get sugar. And I hid it, and there was secrecy around it. So there's one thing, to eat dessert at an end of a meal or have sweet treats, but then you go somewhere else so that you can have more without people seeing you. Oh my God. It's so sad. I can laugh about it now just because I have moved on from this. Um, I still, again, I've told many people I still eat sugar, but it's so different from how I used to eat it. And anyway, if you've been listening to my podcast a long time, you know a lot more depth in certain areas here. But anyway, you have to justify it. You strategize to get it, whatever your addiction is. You tell yourself you need it, and you don't want to admit you ate an entire pie and a tub of ice cream, so you create a story. I don't know where it went. Of course, I know where it went. Oh my gosh. Okay. And when she talked about the nervous system being regulated by substances, I didn't even know what a nervous system was when I was in my early teens, 20s, 30s. No idea. Nobody talked about it. I didn't know how to regulate it. I wasn't taught how to sit in discomfort. And there's so much conversation now about the nervous system and breath work and getting into nature and co-regulation and safety in the body. And I have been teaching this to women for years, how to recognize their nervous systems, how to sit in discomfort. And it's a practice. It's a practice. I've also done some episodes on shame and really understanding like when we can get to the point and not have secrecy and darkness, it really helps to bring light into our bodies, into our mind, into our spirit, into our souls. And we just look at things differently. So I'm grateful that there is all of this information now and that it's becoming more open. And as I said, I'm still working on it. I am not perfect. So on page 97, Elizabeth writes, I was not remotely capable of such conversations. I had no skills for that kind of rigorous honesty, nor any courage for it at all. Instead of being transparent, I did exactly what I had been doing my whole life to survive. I strategized and manipulated and kept secrets in order to feel that I was controlling the situation. And this one pierced my heart and my soul and my being because I didn't have the courage either. As a teenager, I didn't have the emotional capacity or the language to express what was happening inside of me. When my family was unraveling, I cried. I reached out to adults. I really tried. I definitely got some support, but it was bigger than myself. And we just lived in a very different time in the 80s that, this was just not the same as it is now, right? I was inside, I was heartbroken. So instead, I pulled people close and then I pushed them away. And I didn't know why I was doing this, but I know why I'm doing it now. I understand it now. It was because I was terrified of losing them. So if I pushed them away before I got too close to them, then I could protect myself. And because I was terrified of losing them and terrified of being hurt again, I would be in and out of this relationship with people, right? But so sugar was easier and sugar was safer. So it was always there. It was always a friend. Not really, but I thought so back then. All right. And so on page 244, Elizabeth writes, addiction serves a purpose. It is medication for an aching soul, relief for a pained body, and escape from an impossible mind. Oh my gosh. Addiction is a pretty good survival strategy when all other strategies for living have failed. And this again hit home. Addiction is medication for an aching soul. again, I couldn't have put words to this back then, but I was hurt. I was really, really, oopsie. Oh, there you are. I was really, really hurt. Okay. And I was aching. I was in pain. I was overwhelmed inside my own mind. I'm just getting you closer to me because that rain is getting more intense. And years ago, I read that addiction is about dependency. And I became dependent, not because I was weak, but because I didn't have another way. But I thought I was weak. I thought there was something wrong with me. Oh my gosh, the years I've wasted in this frame of mind are just ridiculous. Anyway, it took me years, no gosh, it took me decades to unwind all of this. And there were periods where I would stop eating sugar intensely, and then I would fall back into it. And I didn't understand why at the time, because there's the chemical thing that was going on in my head. There was the emotional. Um, in hindsight, I can definitely see it more clearly. I was binging and restricting, all of these things. Anyway, I'm sure any of you that have had an addiction really can understand what I'm saying here. And then here's another layer. Sugar is everywhere. It's in spaghetti sauce, it's in yogurt, it's in, if you look at sugar in food from the 1970s to now, they have put sugar basically in every food because it is addictive. And some people, they don't, you know, have their brain light up like I do, but I have a brain that lights up with sugar. And even small exposures to it can start this whole cascade again. So I've had to be very aware and notice when I start looping. But the difference now with all the work that I've been doing is that it's not consuming as much as it used to be. Like I used to go into another place and just be eating and eating and eating and eating and eating sugar and had no awareness of what was around me. Okay. So back in the day, and I never really, I mean, there was a time that I bought store-bought processed food because I can remember just buying bugles and sitting on the couch and eating the boxes of it. And oh my gosh, just disgusting. But mostly it was about my baking and consuming massive amounts in secret. But the trigger pathway is real. So if you have a brain like mine that lights up with sugar, or you have a soul searching, or any of these things, know that you are not alone and that if I can get through it, you can get through it. And here's another side note is that I never gained 60 pounds. I gained 10 pounds. But I've always worked out because that also was very clearing for my mind. And so some people think that if you don't have a significant amount, like a weight loss story, that you really don't have a problem. Let me reassure you that I had a problem. I had a big problem. Okay. So just because somebody may look healthy, or normal size doesn't mean that they're not hurting inside. Okay. So the deeper work for me wasn't just about eliminating sugar. It wasn't just about how do I get rid of sugar, which I tried for years, like the binging and the restricting. That is not the problem. The problem is it was about opening my heart, diving into my soul, becoming more authentically myself, stopping the pretending so people would like me. It was about turning toward a higher power because we are not meant to do this alone. And there's another dynamic in the book that shook me. And I'm going to do another episode on higher power and soul searching because I've taken another deeper dive into this. So, you know what? Let me see how much. Oh, I'm going to finish this last little bit here. Hopefully, you can hear me. Okay. So, Raya is diagnosed with cancer and given 6 months to live. And Elizabeth is aching for her. She is wanting her love and support and, I guess sex. And she gives her everything. Rolexes, houses, cars, drugs, um, everything she can think of that will make her feel loved. So Raya feel loved, but in return, Elizabeth to feel loved, right? And this codependency really hit me hard because it made me reflect on parenting. It is hard at times, not always, but to say no to your children. It is hard to hold boundaries, especially when I didn't have a lot for myself. And children and even people, adults, need and crave boundaries, but especially children. They crave structure. And in the book, Raya spirals further when she is given everything. It's her friend Stacy, the one who puts up boundaries and practices tough love, who ultimately helps her again come off drugs. And I had to sit with that because I have some shame around some of my parenting. There's a lot to learn when you parent. I'd never been a parent before, obviously. And there are seasons in my parenting where I wasn't as strong as I wish I had been. And there were moments where I let my children rule me because I wanted them to love me. And oh my gosh, like I said, looking back, I have so much more clarity. Um, Now again, I didn't do this all the time, but there was definitely times I did do it. So I had to do some work on that. I read a lot, I grew, I understood on a deeper level that my children would love me even if I held boundaries. In fact, they actually loved me more sometimes. But reading this book brought up some shame for me. And if I could redo some moments, I absolutely would. And yet I also see that my weakness back then wasn't weakness. It was insecurity. It was an internal lack of something, a safety inside myself that I hadn't fully built yet. And I think that's why this book was so hard for me to read, because it wasn't about judging addiction. It was about seeing myself reflected back in her words and her story and realizing there are still layers where I can grow. So I have a few more things to say, but I'm going to stop it at that today. And I hope that me opening up my heart helps to soften your heart. And if you know anybody with any kind of addiction, shopping, social media, drugs, alcohol, food, by all means, there is so much support out there. And if you feel that they would benefit from listening to this episode, by all means, please share it. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review for my podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. And enjoy this beautiful day, everybody.